Hello and welcome to our next Platform Insight interview series. I'm Nicola Hayes from Platform Markets Group, and I'm delighted to be here today with Sir Craig. Oliver, would you mind introducing yourself and a bit of your background for our viewers, please?
Very happy to. So I started in journalism. I went on to edit BBC TV News, and then I became Director of Politics and Communications for Prime Minister David Cameron at number 10 Downing Street. For those of you who are outside the UK, that's where the Prime Minister's office is, right in the heart of London.
Fantastic. And what is it you're doing now?
So I am a partner at FGS Global, and we're a consultancy set up to help businesses with their strategy, with their reputation. How do you navigate what is an increasingly volatile and disrupted world? How do you make sure you take opportunities that are out there, but also deal with potential threats as well?
Which, I mean, for our sector, which obviously digital infrastructure as a whole, data centres, networks, is absolutely
very
crucial
relevant
at the moment. Very, very relevant. And we have our next event, our Platform UK event, coming up in February 2026, where we will be looking at where the UK is positioned in terms of inward investment. Foreign direct investment into our sector is huge at the moment. But where we sit as a country in terms of the opportunities and how we are seen by the outside world, in terms of the geopolitical risk factors. I mean, it's one of those things that, for years, the UK, very, very stable. It certainly wasn't on a list with Russia or some of the African nations in terms of people backing away. Do you think that's changed slightly?
Look, I think Britain is a great country and there's lots going on there, but it's definitely some people since Brexit been looking at us and say, is this the country we thought it is? Is this the right place? Is it the best place to invest? And I think that any government in the UK has got a real job persuading foreign investors to come to the UK. What's interesting about your sector, talking about data centres, that kind of thing, is I think we do have a government and a consensus in politics in the UK that we do need to build data centres. Obviously, any forward-looking economy needs that. The issue is problems with planning, people objecting to them. Do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the water? Do we have the energy? That kind of thing. And so there's a sort of overall sort of very straightforward thing. Yeah, of course we need to do this, but the devil's in the detail.
It is, and that's one of obviously the news over the last couple of weeks, and particularly across our sector, has been very, very much up in arms about recent reports about the fact that our sector is using up all water capabilities, electricity. The reason our electricity bills are really high is because of this data centre growth, yet the government has very, very ambitious plans as setting the UK as a prime hub for AI. How do those two things work together?
How do you square the circle? Yeah, I mean, look, this is very, very common in politics, isn't it? There's a clear statement of direction, but the reality and the complexity of that and the circle that needs to be squared is very, very real. Look, I think that what a lot of people make the mistake of doing is thinking that the government is going to tell the story for them or that they're going to find a way through this. I think it's up to industries that have a problem to work with government, partner with them, make suggestions, create a narrative which explains, look, this is the future. Yes, there are issues about energy, infrastructure, planning, that kind of thing. And here are the creative solutions that are going to get us over that. Because the reality is, if Britain doesn't do that, then it's going to get left behind in the AI future.
Absolutely. How much involvement do you think the government should have in funding and enabling the infrastructure to be brought up to speed, no pun intended, for us to be able to compete in the global world on the AI side?
Well, let me take that backwards. On terms of the infrastructure and the planning, I think that the government absolutely needs to take a leading role in that. There's legislation in the country, the ability for judicial reviews, for councils to step in, for people to get in the way. It's a very interesting book that's just been written by Derek Thompson and Ezra Klein, which is very famous and I'm sure will be very familiar in your area, Abundance, which is basically how have we got to the stage where it's very difficult to build anything or to make things work. And he gives some great examples like the California high-speed rail project. We had similar with HS2 in the UK.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be building loads of houses, but finding it very, very difficult because people don't want their local area being screwed up. Mm-hmm. And then there's a bigger issue about do we actually have the infrastructure? So you take the water industry or energy supply, water industry, very, very old system, leaky pipes, that kind of thing. Has it got the capacity? And energy, the cost of that and the sheer drain of that and the impact of that.
The availability. So it's not even the cost, it's the availability is becoming a huge issue.
Cost, availability. And then also you have a government at the moment which is also saying in the UK that it wants to reach net zero by quite ambitious targets. So that is the reality of modern politics, that you have this desperate need to do something about climate change. You also have a desperate need to grow as an economy, a desperate need to make sure that you fit for purpose. The exam question I think facing the UK government, as it is with many governments at the moment, is how do we grow? So I think more and more attention needing to be given to that, and I suspect you will see that over the next couple of years.
Do you think they really have a plan? I mean, I'm putting you on the spot here, but I can't say I'm entirely convinced.
I think in the broad sense they have a plan. They know that they want to do it. That Peter Kyle, who's just been moved as a cabinet minister in a reshuffle, but definitely had strong ideas about how to do this and how to make this work. As I said, the devil is in the detail, and they are also dealing with fires that are going off left, right and centre. I mean, one of the things that I found as a real issue in number 10 Downing Street was that we are in this kind of age of volatility where the next story that breaks can be seconds away because somebody can just press send on an iPhone. So the reality of governing is complex, chaotic, very, very difficult. And I think that that's no excuse, but it is a reality. So I think that the importance is to constantly be there, to constantly be offering help, to constantly be partnering, and to try and find ways to do that. The issue, my experience, is a lot of businesses are finding that the bandwidth of government is really hard. Actually getting in there and talking to them, very, very hard. We're also, I think, in the situation in the UK, which is being reflected in many other countries as well, is where more populist leaders, and you can take your view one way or another, and that I'm not making any comment on that, are pulling the conversation to other subjects. So in the UK, immigration is now by far the number one issue. It seems that almost nothing else gets talked about. So how do you make sure that what you consider important is elevated up the agenda? How are you making sure that you actually talk to government and do that? But I think a lot of it is trying to take control of the narrative and trying to make clear to people that if we don't do this as a problem, but if we do, there's a great opportunity.
Yeah. And I think half of the problem is, as an industry, and I think we need to get this across not just in government circles, but also out to the general public as well. It's a PR issue. It's explaining why this is necessary, why actually, it's all generated from end user demand, videos of cats killing the climate. But I'm not necessarily always convinced that with the way the political system works, and this, it's not just the UK, it's across the world, we tend to look at short-term solutions. And obviously with growth in AI, with the figures that we've been seeing today in some of the presentations that have been going on, where we're looking at 20 and 30 years, whether there is that long-term vision or whether it will suddenly change in 4 years' time again. And where that leaves the UK in terms of generating investor confidence.
So you're absolutely right to highlight the fact that the length of a government in a developed Western economy is often 4 or 5 years. And the reality is that, as you say, this is 20, 30-year projects. And you have autocratic leaders like Xi and whatever saying me or somebody very like me is going to be in charge in 20 years' time. You need to focus on what we're doing. Look, as a fully signed up Democrat, I feel very strongly that we all need to get behind the system and we all need to work together. Yeah. And also what the political parties need to do is create more of a consensus in terms of the long-term growth of the country. This flip-flopping is a major problem, and an understanding and agreement. In the past, we actually had much more consensus than we have now. And the reality is, in my own country, we've had 6 prime ministers in the last 10 years. Look at the last 4 US elections. You had Biden, you had Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump.
Yeah.
The flip-flopping there is enormous. And in a very short period of time, I think in Australia, they have an election every 3 years. This is increasingly becoming problematic, and it forces politicians into a situation where they're almost campaigning all the time. And as you say, they go for the short term. We have to try to find a way where these big issues are being talked about, and there are ways you can invest cross-parliament, cross-party for a long period of time.
And final question, What would your advice be to any operators, companies within the UK that are looking to generate foreign direct investment? Because let's face it, these plans that we've got cost a huge amount of money, and a lot of that money is going to come from territories outside of the UK. What would your advice be to those companies?
I do think that your story is so important. What are you actually telling people? Painting a picture of a vibrant, capable, leading economy where there's proper jobs, investment, opportunities coming out of that, and the reality that you can lead the way on that, and you can do that in a way that isn't destructive and isn't going to cause lots of problems. So I would say a huge amount of energy and effort going into that, huge amount of energy and effort going into the delivery of that, while also behind the scenes working very, very, very hard to talk to the policymakers and that kind of thing
absolutely.
as well. All of this is very easy to say, very
Our
hard
industry,
to do.
and I've been in this industry for 30 years, I've seen it grow. It's like watching a child grow up. Has always kept its head below the parapet.
Yes, very common.
And we're not very, very good at promoting ourselves as an industry, in the lobbying, in the making sure that we're at the top of the agenda, and I do think that needs to change.
So I think that this is very, very common, and I think in the past you could keep your head below the parapet and that you'd be in a situation where you could sort of bumble along and it would probably be okay. I think in the modern world, more than ever, if you create a vacuum by putting your head below the parapet, people will fill it for you. And if you don't, in the modern world, define yourself, others will define you. And I think that's what's going on at the moment, is there's lots of negative stories about costs, infrastructure, problems, not very, very much on the positive side of it. So I would say working incredibly hard to create that narrative and make sure that it's delivered. It's a lot of effort, but it's really important. And if you don't, then it will stumble and fall and your critics will win. And then the reality is that the investment goes elsewhere and the jobs and opportunities go elsewhere.
Which is a shame. Industry, we need to own the narrative in order to make sure that all of
and there's a
these
very
great
good
plans...
business that helps with that.
Excellent. Love that. So Craig, thank you so much
Nice
for
to
joining
meet
me.
you,
It's
Nicola.
been really, really nice chatting to you. Thank you very much, listeners, and I will see you at Platform UK.